I installed this caulking in the gap between my kitchen cabinets and the floor about 7 years ago, and there is nothing wrong with it. I'm just taking it out because today I'm going to be showing you how to fill the gap between cabinets and floors. So often after you have cabinets installed, you'll find a gap is left behind between the cabinets and the floors. Some people don't mind the gap and they'll leave it the way it is. I am on the side of always filling these gaps underneath cabinets for a couple of reasons. The first reason is because sometimes things get stuck in those gaps and you'll never get them back. When we first had these cabinets installed, my little kid slid a puzzle piece to me from one of his favorite puzzles, slid it across the floor, and it went underneath the gap. He was heartbroken when I told him that there was no way for me to get it back for him. The second main reason to seal that gap underneath cabinets is because you don't want sticky juices and coffees and food and crumbs to gather underneath your cabinets. It's just going to attract bugs and critters like mice and stuff into your house. So I always fill that gap to try to keep underneath the cabinets clean and free of anything that's going to attract bugs and critters. Most of the gaps underneath cabinets can be sealed with a paintable caulk. Since my cabinets are white, I am using a white caulk. They also have a clear one, so if you have a wood look cabinet, a clear caulking would probably be the best option. You can also generally find a cream or a gray version of paintable caulks in the stores. You can also paint over the caulking, so if you color match your cabinets and just paint over that little line of caulking, you're good to go. Now this caulking says that it can fill gaps that are up to a 1/2 inch high or a 1/2 inch deep. I don't really like the look of anything past a 1/4 inch though. So you can go up to a 1/2 inch safely with the caulking, but it doesn't look as nice. If a gap is bigger than a 1/4 inch, I prefer to use molding instead, like a quarter round molding, a shoe molding, even like pine stop I've seen people use. So whatever molding you like the most at the bottom of the cabinet, go for that. To prep the gap underneath the cabinets for new caulking, I'm going to clean the cabinets and the floor around it with an all-purpose cleaner that can degrease and clean the area. You just want to be able to get good adhesion with that caulking, so you want to remove anything that could possibly get in the way of that. If you've seen my previous videos about caulking the gap between countertop and tile backsplashes, you'll know that I used a rubbing alcohol there. I do not use rubbing alcohol on painted or stained surfaces. It can damage the finish. So we're just using all-purpose cleaner here. After I clean the surface with that all-purpose cleaner, I then follow it up with a clean wet rag. I want to remove any residue that might be left behind by that cleaner too. Then you want the cabinets and the flooring to be completely dry before you apply the new caulking. Next up, I tape off that gap between the cabinets and the flooring with painter's tape. The painter's tape makes it easy to get nice, clean, straight lines and also keeps some of the mess off of the cabinet. So most of the mess is going to go onto the painter's tape and you can just peel it away. I tape off the cabinet and the flooring. You want to make sure that you have the thinnest caulk line possible to seal that gap underneath the cabinets completely, but also not have too much of a caulk line. You don't want a huge caulk line at the bottom of your pretty cabinets. Here's a quick look at the gap between my cabinets and flooring after I've taped it off. You just want to see a tiny bit of the cabinet. Most of the caulking is going to go underneath that gap or inside of that gap. That's going to give that caulking a good grab and it's not going to fall off later. So I'm using that paintable caulking that I showed you earlier, and I have a clean wet rag again. This will help keep my finger nice and wet while I'm smoothing out the caulking. I applied a pretty thick bead of caulking here because I'm going to be pushing that caulking into that gap as much as possible while I'm smoothing it out. So I use a wet finger to smooth out that caulking. This time, this pass, I'm going to be pushing the caulking into the gap, and I'm also removing all of the excess caulking. The next 2 or 3 times that I go over the caulking with a wet finger, I am actually more going for the final look now. So I want that caulking to have a nice smooth look and also not have an indent where the gap is. So I want it sort of flush with the cabinet as much as possible. After 2 passes here, I decided that I had removed enough of the caulking that I was safe to take away the tape. So I carefully removed the tape. I don't want that extra caulking to get anywhere else. If you're new to caulking, it's probably safer to leave the tape behind for the next pass that I make too. For the final pass, to try to get it as flush with the cabinet as possible, I used a rag wrapped around my fingernail and pressed my fingernail and my finger along the edge of that gap. So the fingernail was acting as a straight edge to sort of flatten that caulk out level with the cabinet above it. So I wanted to have as much of a smooth finish to that gap as possible. I repeated this a few times to make sure that I was cleaning off all of the excess gap that was getting on the flooring while flattening out that caulk that's in that gap between the cabinets and the floors. Once you have that caulk line looking nice, you can let it dry for the 30 or 40 minutes that it says on the container before you decide what you're going to do next. So I'm good with the way my caulk line looks here. If you feel like your caulk line is underfilled, you can always tape it off again once it's dried, tape it off again, and re-caulk just to fill it up a little bit more. That's it for how to seal gaps under your cabinets. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I do try to answer them whenever I get a chance. Bye, guys.